Just want to confirm we are starting.
Yes, sir. We have a couple attendees right now.
All right. Thank you very much again for having me. And before I get started, I just want to give you some words of wisdom that I wish were given to me when I was younger. And a gentleman named Roy H. Williams, he's a best-selling author. He said, "A smart man makes a mistake, learns from it, and never makes that mistake again." I'm going to pause here, as probably some of you are already doing that and proud of yourself and telling yourselves, "I'm a smart man," and you are, and that's super awesome. But I want to give you the second part of the quote, which is what we're going to think about as we go through these sessions. It says, "But a wise man finds a smart man and learns from him how to avoid the mistake altogether." And that's why I'm here, and that's what this is about, to give you the opportunity to not make similar mistakes that I have made and I have learned. And in this particular session, those mistakes could cost you some money. So my name is Alexis Beltre, and I currently live in Buffalo, New York. Go Bills. And I mentioned that because I actually grew up in the Bronx, single family household. And I learned a couple of lessons about finances just watching what my parents did and didn't do. I made it up here. I went to college in Niagara University, and that's where I graduated and got my accounting degree. And I've been teaching financial literacy for over 10 years. Now, what I'm going to be teaching you, some of it is book smarts, but a lot of it is experiences. It's time that I bump my head, bruise my knee, stub my toe, financially, that is. And what I'm hoping is that I can share everything that I've learned about money that I wish I would have knew when I was younger, hoping that you can avoid making some of those mistakes. But one important lesson that I have learned is that no matter how much money I make, no matter what I buy, the things that I get, what's really important is what you see in front of you. So before we start talking about money, I just wanted to highlight that if you can love what you do for a living and love those people that you choose to be around, just learning that lesson alone, it really doesn't matter how much money you have, because you're going to find yourself to be happy. So what exactly is financial literacy? Well, financial literacy is about understanding how money impacts you, how it impacts you when you buy something, when you save it, when you invest it, or even when you give it away. It's about understanding how your cash flows in and out. And in this session, and other sessions that I'll be teaching, you're going to learn how to control your cash flow. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But why is that important? Well, because if you don't tell where to go, someone else will. And let me dive into that just a little bit and help you understand what I mean, because the idea is about controlling your money. I don't know if you knew, but there are a lot of people after your money. And I'm not talking about thieves. Well, not the kind of thieves I grew up with, but let's talk about companies in general. And companies spend 5 to 12% of sales on advertising. Now, let me give you an example. So Nike, and I love Nike. Now, they, for example, had last year, they made $12 billion in sales, meaning that we bought $12 billion worth of stuff from them. And let's say they spend 5% of that on advertising. That's $600 million Nike spend trying to convince you to buy their product. All right, let's say that they spend 10%. That's $1.2 billion. What do you think they actually spent? Nike spent $3.5 billion on advertising, which means that that's how much money they spent trying to convince you, again, to buy their product. How about Amazon? What do you think they spent on advertising? Amazon spent $6.8 billion. Think about that. That's $6,800,000,000 to try to get you to come buy things from them. And that's crazy to me. Well, not really that crazy, because these companies aren't stupid. They're not going to spend that much money unless they know it's going to work, unless they know that what they're doing is going to draw you to buy their product. And that kind of stops us to think that when we buy things or when we gravitate to certain products, is that really me? Or is that somebody trying to pull me in that direction? Well, think about where companies actually advertise. So they advertise in a couple of different mediums. Where do you think they choose most to advertise? If you're thinking social media, you're absolutely correct. So they use social media as well as streaming apps like Netflix, and that's where they spend most of their money. And what they do is, or think about what they do is they study you. I don't know if you knew this, but advertising companies actually study you by taking information like when you like something or you watch a video or spend a lot of time on a certain site, do some searches, they grab that information and then they sell it to companies so that they know how to build a product or build an advertisement to put it in front of you. So think about that time when you were looking for AirPods, and then you notice when you were either sending an email or probably looking at your social media, every time AirPods just happen to pop up. You're like, oh, wow, that's kind of interesting. Well, it was designed that way. And it sounds a little convenient, like they're doing the work for me. A little scary at the same time, but it's really dangerous. And it's dangerous if you don't understand how to control your money. It's important to know because every company is after your money. And this is why they're in business. They're trying to get you to buy their product. And even the money that you don't even have yet, they're trying to get it. And that's the importance behind financial literacy. It's about understanding your money so you can tell it where to go before someone else does it for you. But it starts by understanding this phrase called cash flow. So why is it that we earn money? Why do we spend so much time either going to work, chasing money, whether it's we earn $100 a week or $1,000 a week? Why is it that we earn it? What is it for? What are we going to do with it? Well, you're probably thinking about a number of different things you want to do with your money, but it really boils down to we get it to spend it. And that's okay. I grew up learning that, they kept telling me, why do you keep spending your money? Why do you keep spending your money? Spending your money is the reason why we get money. And it's not about spending it. It's really about how we spend it. We're going to talk a little bit about it today. But financial literacy starts with understanding, again, how your cash flows, which simply means how your cash is moving in and out. When you think about a business, how's the cash moving into the business or moving out of the business? When you think about me and you, how is it moving into our pocket? Or even how is it moving out? How are we spending this money? And understanding that. Now, this class, this session, and other sessions isn't about making money. What it's mainly about, it's about understanding where your money is going so that you can keep your cash flowing. So you don't make mistakes that stop your cash from actually flowing. And this particular session here, it's about savings. And we're going to talk about a couple of other things in other sessions like budgeting and depth and credit and investing. But today we're going to focus on savings. And savings in general, it's an easy concept. You put money away. What is it? You save it. But the difficult part is actually doing it, actually doing the saving. That's what gets difficult. But let's say that you were going to save and you actually could save. What would you save for? Think about some reasons or what it is that you would want to save up money for. You can use some of the reasons that you see right on the screen. And there are a number of reasons to save. Now, the reasons aren't the most important part. It's creating a reason, because saving works best when you attach a purpose to it. It's kind of like you set a goal for your money to reach. And too often I've been told to save, but just because I had to do it. So I did, I would put money away just because I was told to do it, but I didn't really have a reason. And what I would find is I would end up blowing that money on things that I really didn't need. Like I remember, I would save money just because I was told to save, and I saw some sneakers I wanted. So I bought them. And next thing you know, I bought a pair of sneakers every week and my savings was gone. And it's because I didn't have anything connected. Like if I said, maybe I want a car. Because when you attach a goal to your savings, what you'll find is that you'll second guess whether you want to spend it or not. Because you're like, if I spend the savings, then I know it's going to take me longer to actually get there. So that's why you want to assign a purpose to your actual savings. Now, something to know is that there are two categories where you may find savings falls under. And the first one here we've heard often. I grew up hearing it: save up for a rainy day. And that's for an emergency. If an emergency happens, make sure you have some money. And we're going to dive into that in just a moment. But I want to highlight the second one, this other reason, which is about what I like to call save for a sunny day, which is an opportunity. And an example of an opportunity, let's think about a job interview. Now, when you're thinking about a job interview, you're probably wondering, what do I have to save up money for? Well, do you have currently the clothes that you need to go on this job interview? Now, of course, it depends on the job, but I'm not talking about your khakis and your polo and a pair of J's. Do you have a pair of slacks, some nice slacks, some dress shoes, a button down, even a tie? There was a great quote that I heard: don't dress up for the job that you have, dress up for the job that you want. And say you're going into a job interview into Wegmans or Foot Locker or wherever it is. If you go in however you want to go in, they're like, oh, you'll probably have a great interview and you'll get that job. But if you go in dressed up to the T and you go in and say, in your head, I may not go for the manager's job, but I want the manager's job, those individuals that are interviewing are saying, you know what, that person's going to be a great manager one day, because they see it in you before you even open your mouth. So imagine when you start talking and convince them even more. So now when you're thinking about saving up for this opportunity, a job interview is an example. The closer the job interview is one side of it. Now, what about traveling to that job interview? Now, when you get that job interview, what if you don't have a ride to get there and you actually have to take the bus? Do you have some money set aside to take the bus and to get back home? Now, you may be able to get money from your parents, but what if you don't? It's great to have something set to the side. I'll go a little bit further. What about when you finally get this job? Because you will. How are you going to get there? Even if you have a car, do you have some gas money saved up to get there every day? Because I don't know if you knew this, but when you start a job, you don't get paid right away. It's going to take you about a week, maybe two, to actually get your first paycheck. I used to manage employees, and I remember I used to interview candidates, and at times I'll interview great candidates, and there were some times where I'll hire them right on the spot, and I'll ask them to start work in a couple of days. And they would tell me that could they wait a week or so before they can start because they don't have the money to go to work and come back right away. They needed to get that money. And unfortunately, I couldn't wait that long because I needed someone right there and then. So individuals lost the opportunity because they didn't have any money saved up for that opportunity. Just something to think about. So let's go back to rainy days. Now, rainy days are inevitable, which means that they're going to happen. Emergencies are going to happen. So everyone should have what they call an emergency fund, which basically means a savings for rainy days. Now, I want to share with you a couple of statistics that you really don't want to fall into, because and what's it about is a lot of people who haven't packed an umbrella for upcoming rainy days. So check these statistics out. 78% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Now that's 8 out of 10 people. Now you may be thinking, okay, what's wrong with that? You get paid, you spend your money, then you get paid again. Well, let's think about individuals that have bills and have responsibilities, that their paycheck, all of it goes to everything that they need, whether it's their bills and the food that they eat, and there's nothing left over. And what they find is that they get into trouble if an emergency happens because they don't have any money left over to pay for that if their car breaks down or something else happens. Now, let's look at this next category. 39% of Americans can't cover a $400 emergency. Now, these individuals are a little better than the 78%. But what happens is that most emergencies, especially when you have responsibilities, tend to be more than $400. So what happens when emergency happens? These individuals find themselves in the same place as the 78%. They end up in debt, They end up having to borrow money for somewhere to be able to pay for this emergency. And both of these individuals end up just like this last category. 24% of Americans' paychecks go to consumer debt. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about debt in the debt session, but if you think about this, is that for every $100, $25 of that for these individuals is already gone before they even get it. And it's going to pay for stuff that they borrowed to pay. So maybe it's clothes that don't even fit them anymore, they don't even use, furniture, whatever it is. But before they come home, $25 of that, every $100 is already gone. And that's a bit scary because so many people have ended up this way. Now, sadly, I've been in each of these categories at once or more times in my life. And there have been some times that I've been in all three of them at once. And all of this could have been avoided for me with just a little bit more money management or better money management. But you know what? You don't have to worry about that or falling into this. Why? Because you are now learning from my mistakes so you can avoid them in the future. You don't want to fall into these places, and it's so easy to fall into it, but also with a little bit of work, you never have to worry about being into any of these categories. So with savings being so important, why are so many people not doing it? Well, bankrate.com, a survey that they did, has found that for most people, they just don't have any more money after they pay expenses. Reality is that they're broke. And for others, debt gets in the way. So like those individuals at 25% or $25 out of every $100 goes to debt, that $25 could have went to savings, but unfortunately it can't. And here's the interesting part, that for some individuals, they just haven't gotten to it. And that part is a little concerning for me because these are individuals who may have money to save and know they should save, but they just decided not to. They just haven't. And maybe there's some individuals like that on this call. I've been that individual. And another mistake I've made when I've learned to save, and then it was too late. An emergency happened and I didn't have any money left over. So I had to borrow money to pay for that emergency. But now, interestingly enough, all of these reasons for many of us start with how we feel about money. Now, not sure if you knew, but there's emotions attached to spending money. And I'll give you two examples or two areas of emotions that when we spend money, we sometimes do it either by acting to what's around us. And that's called reactionary spending. Now, don't worry too much about these terms, but they won't be on the quiz. Now, the next one says, or by intentionally making a decision. Now, it won't take a rocket science to figure out that that's called intentional spending. But let me explain a little bit further. Now, examples of reactionary spending is, say, for example, you went to the store and you went there to buy some milk because you need milk. But on the way to the register, you saw your favorite cookies or your favorite treat, whatever that is, chips or whatever, and you bought them. Why? Because they're delicious. And you knew when you eat them, they were going to make you feel great. Well, for the most part. Now, what you may have not thought about was, by buying those chips, how is that going to affect you financially? And for many that do think about that, it's more like, I really shouldn't buy this, but I'm going to anyway because these things are delicious. Now, let's take the other one, intentional spending. Now, same scenario, but before you actually go to the store, you actually know how much you should be spending for your groceries. And guess what? When you created that grocery list, what do you think you added on there? That favorite treat, whether it's cookies or chips, whatever it is, you added it on there because you like these. So you want to make sure that you bought these. Now, the key piece is that the amount that you set aside or you said that you can spend on groceries was based on the goal that you created to help your money grow. And if you remember when we talked about savings earlier, that you want to attach a goal to it. So you basically said that if I spend any more money on groceries, I'm gonna have to tap into that savings, and it's gonna take me longer to get that thing that I want. And that's the idea. That's where we want to get to. intentional spending. Now, here's a question for everybody, and I think we've all been victim to this. How many of us have been to the store and have bought that treat and not thought about anything but that treat? I've been there. And sometimes I find myself there. I got to avoid aisles in the supermarket because I know if I go down it, I'm going to get it. And I've already checked that off the list. So let's talk about what do we spend an emergency fund for? When we have an emergency fund, what do we use it? Now, here's an exercise that we're going to go through. I want you to look at this list. I want you to examine this list. Now, in this list, there are a few categories on what you should be spending your emergency fund on. And I want you to find those. So I'm going to give you a moment to again examine this and pick out of these reasons what you should be spending an emergency fund. And remember, that emergency fund is just for emergencies. So go ahead. I'll give you a moment to think about that. All right. I hope you got those answers. You have those answers locked in? All right, here we go. Now, here are what are reasons that you should be spending your emergency fund. Now, right off the top, repairing your car. If your car unexpectedly breaks down, yeah, you want to fix that because you need your car to go to work, to school. It's something that you need. It was unexpected, and you want to make sure that you fix that. Now, you lost your job and you got to cover your bills. Absolutely. That's what that emergency fund is for, as a safety net to help you out. It was unexpected. Now, this Wi-Fi is down. I don't know if anybody picked it, but this time last year, it wouldn't fall under the emergency fund. But with the pandemic, like myself, a lot of individuals work out of home now. So Wi-Fi is crucial. And for some of you, probably all of you, are virtual learning. Wi-Fi is a must. So if it breaks down, yeah, now it's emergency. A year ago, for you, maybe it was an emergency, but I think you would have survived if Wi-Fi was down for a little bit. Now, what about replacing your broken phone? Yeah, your phone's a necessity. You need it to communicate. Now, I'm not saying you get the newest phone, but you should replace it and you should use that emergency phone. And that doesn't mean that you should break your phone so you go to that last item and upgrade your phone. But these are reasons to replace or to use your emergency fund. Now, here's a question. Why wasn't groceries something that you use why shouldn't you use emergency fund money on groceries? So think about that. Why didn't that come up as a reason? Well, if you think about groceries is something that you have to buy, you have to eat. So there should already be money for groceries. And if you don't have money for groceries, it's probably because you spent it on something else that you shouldn't have. Or there was another emergency and you spent your groceries on that. But the emergency fund, if you notice, are for unexpected things to be able to fulfill things that you need, like a car, or you got to pay for bills at your job. So these are unexpected. Groceries is an item that you actually should already have money for. Now, that last one I put in there, you're probably all scratching your head. That's just there for a little marital advice. First of all, don't forget your spouse's birthday. I tell you right now, as later in life when you get married, do not forget your spouse's birthday. But if you do, I'm going to tell you, hit the emergency fund, break the piggy bank, and make sure you don't go home without an emergency fund. Let me be the first to tell you, do not come home without that birthday present. All right, so when it comes to emergency fund, you're noticing that I'm spending a lot of time there because emergency fund, they're built in case of an emergency, which is going to happen. You can try to dodge them all you want, but emergencies are going to happen and they're set there for that purpose, to get you ready for that. And not having money set aside is going to derail all of your other plans. So think about it as you start saving up money for whatever it is you want. If an emergency happens and you don't have an emergency fund, you're going to tap into that savings. This is going to change your goals a little bit or slow it down. An emergency fund is foundational to becoming what's called financially free. And financial freedom is something we're going to talk about in just a moment, but just let you know that an emergency fund is foundational to get there. And as you get older and you start having these things called bills, a great place to start saving for an emergency fund is somewhere around $500. Now, that may seem like a lot, but you get there little by little. And as your bills start increasing, so should your emergency fund. Again, these are things that are going to come that I want to prepare you for. Now, ideally, when you get this career and you start having things like car payments and a mortgage or rent, and a mortgage is basically the loan you're paying for the house that you buy, your emergency fund ideally should be 3 to 6 months of all of those bills, because the idea is that if I ever lose my job, I'm okay because I have some money set aside to protect me until I find another job. But you have some time to get there. So your main focus right now should be on preparing to save for those things that you want now. And guess what? If you have an emergency, it's okay that you tap into some of that, because it's probably rare that you have an emergency that you need money for. But if you have an emergency that you need money for, it's probably not that much money. So just focus on saving for those things that you want, like whether it's a laptop, maybe that PlayStation, or even a car. Focus on saving for that so you have money prepared for that. And something to know that when you save, again, I was mentioning it earlier, it doesn't all happen at once. You see $500 and you're probably like, oh, how am I going to get there? It happens over time, little by little. You just save up and you continue to save up until you get there. I promise you, it'll continue to grow. So, all right, so when we start to save, where is it that we're keeping this money? Well, your piggy bank is going to get full at some point, and I probably, if you want to save it under your mattress, that's cool, but I truly advise you go to a bank. There's this thing called a savings account that you may have heard of. Now, I won't spend too much time there because it's pretty straightforward. You go to the bank and you save money. Now, a couple of things to know about savings accounts: if you are under 18, you're going to need your parents to open it. So I just want to give you a heads up. But when you turn 18, you can go ahead and take full control and ownership of that account. Now, when you go out and looking for them with your parents, look for a savings account that has little to no fees. Something to think about, that there are accounts out there in banks that the banks are going to charge you fees for opening that. But for you, there's probably many accounts that have little to no fees, as you want to make sure you keep your money. Some of them have ATM cards, which allow you to take money out of ATMs. I'll be very careful with those, because remember, a savings account is for you to put money in to reach that goal. And the more you have access to it, the more you're likely to use it. Now, just to let you know, when you have a savings account, you can only withdraw from that savings account 6 times a year. Remember that, 6 times a month, not a year, 6 times a month. Why is that important? Because again, savings are there for you to meet that goal. So you to take time, and then you only withdraw that money to be able to purchase that thing that you were saving up for. It's not there, don't put your lunch money in there. Don't put that money that you're going to use on a consistent basis, because you're going to have limitations to access it. And your bank will charge you fees or give you restrictions on getting your money if you go over that 6 times a month. Now, when you're ready for that, just do a quick Google search. There are tons and tons of savings accounts out there. Many of them have little, many of them have no fees. And if you have any questions, reach out to me and I'll show you how to do that at the end of this session. Now, when you're ready to save, because for me at least, it was very, very difficult for me to start off by thinking about that goal. When you have that goal, I just want to give you a couple of tips that have helped me along that journey. Now, right off the top, it says no spend days. I like to couple that with cash only days. Now, it's kind of tough to not spend any money, but when we go back, think about when you go back to school. And if you're not, I'm thinking most of us are virtual now. I think they stopped, but if you're still going to school, or when you go back to school, only bring the money that you actually need. Where if you're paying for lunch, maybe you're paying for transportation, maybe only keep that, or maybe just a little bit more. So that way you're not spending too much, and you're not spending money on things like Starbucks. And I'm not promoting caffeine, but I know y'all be out there. I see y'all. Now think about now monthly spending bans, this next one. And when we go into the session about budgeting, we're going to find areas that are problem areas that for whatever reason, that's where we spend most of our money. And when we find those, that's where the area that you put a monthly spending ban on. And if it's Starbucks, again, I'm not promoting caffeine. That's where you say, I'm going to not buy Starbucks this month. And I bring up Starbucks because I work out of home. I work in my home virtually. So I have an office at home, and sometimes before the pandemic, I wanted to get out of my house and change the scenario. So I would work out of Starbucks, specifically the one downtown near Hutch Tech. And without fail, every day around between 2:30 and 3:30, that place was flooded with individuals from high school. It's probably Hutch Tech and a couple of other ones. And I would see individuals on a daily basis behind a $5 cup of coffee. And to each their own, that's what you want to do. But if you think about it, let's say that you only, if that's you, let's say you only bought 3 cups of coffee a day. Or maybe it's not coffee, because they have a lot of non-caffeinated beverages that are absolutely delicious. And say you bought 3 of them a day and you did a monthly spending ban, you would save $60 a month just by saying, I'm not going to buy Starbucks. And if Starbucks is your thing, maybe your things are soda, or up here in Western New York, pop, or maybe it's McDonald's, or whatever it is. Once you find those areas that you spend most of your money on and you say, I'm not going to spend that, you're going to realize that you're going to be able to stack a lot of money. So we'll find those areas. The next one I have here is called automate your savings. And for some of you, maybe you have a job, or when you actually get a job, when you get a paycheck, that paycheck eventually will probably go into a checking account and get directly deposited in there, which would be recommended to you, which is not a bad thing, because now you don't just have cash on you, have a banking. You can learn about banks. As long as you use it responsibly, checking accounts are great. But the other thing that you can do with that is you can create a savings account that you can tell the bank to automatically put money into your savings account from your checking. Why is that important? For me, at least, it was very difficult for me to say, I'm not going to spend this and I'm going to put it in my savings. What worked for me, if I didn't see it, I didn't worry about it. So you can set up a checking account to do that. And you just say, $25, $50, whatever it is a month, or, just put that into my savings and leave it there, out of sight, out of mind. The only piece of advice that I give you, if you set that up, is set it up on a date that falls maybe a day or 2 after you get paid. Why is that important? Because the bank is going to take money out of your checking, whether it's there or not. So you kind of want to make sure that there's money in there. You're just telling the bank, move money from this checking to that savings. They're not looking to see if there's money in there. So take that in consideration if you do set that up. I'll also, with automate savings, do that mentally. Mentally tell yourself that whenever I get money, I am going to save a portion of it. Now, what I used to do is I used to say a percentage, maybe 50%, which is half of it. That's too much, 25%, whatever that is, where I would say 25% of any time I get money, I'm going to put that money to the side. Now, when you think about any surplus money means anything you weren't expecting. Now, for those of you who have jobs, I say when you get birthday money, or maybe money from a side gig like babysitting, or cutting somebody's lawn, or doing some chores, if you have a job, just put that all away because you weren't expecting it. Put it into your savings for that goal that you're trying to reach, so you can get there faster. Now, for those of you who don't have a job and that's pretty much all the money you get, or if allowances, take that percentage mindset. I'm going to put half of that, or 25% of that, and I'm going to put it away so I can get to that goal. It's about automating things in your head or in reality. Now, this next one is very important that a lot of individuals take for granted. Treat yourself. And we take that for granted because often when we treat ourselves, we feel guilty. Like we bought something that made us feel good. Why do we feel guilty? That's why you have the money. It's not saying splurge all your money, but I'm saying treat yourself to some of it. If it's that McDonald's, or it's that pop, or it's that, whatever it is, treat yourself with some of your money, because when you don't, you're going to end up splurging it like I did with my money, just frivolously buying things because you just didn't spend money for a long time. Emotional spending. Just think about that. So treat yourself. And lastly, and really importantly, make sure you are setting goals for your money, because success is really about creating goals and achieving those goals. And it's no different when it comes to finances. So make sure that you're putting a goal, you're setting a goal connected with your money. And I'm trying to just scroll my thing down. And even if it's you're telling your money to sit there and wait for an emergency to happen, but make sure that you're connecting your money to a goal, because it will have you second guess spending it in the future. Now, I'm going to put you to work now. Here's an exercise that we're going to work on to think about this savings mindset. So the first thing that I want you to do is I want you to look at this scenario that you see right on the screen. There's a bunch of numbers up there, but I'm going to give you some questions, and they're based on this scenario that I have right in front of you. So the first question I want you to think about is, how many months will it take to save up, let's say for a MacBook, a laptop, maybe if you don't like MacBooks, a PC that costs $1,000. Now look at the scenario here of how much money you're making a week, how much expenses are coming out, and what do you have left over. Now I did the math for you already. All you have to figure out is how long would it take you to get $1,000 in a month? So come up with that answer, think about, and let's go to this next question. What could you do differently to save up for the laptop faster? Now think about what's happening on this screen. What could you do a little bit differently? All right, now next I want you to think about, what should you save up for before you start saving for the laptop? Now, go ahead and start thinking about these answers. Jot your answers down. I'll give you a moment. Bring out your calculators if you need to. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and reveal the answer. So now for question number 1, you probably got this already. It's going to take you 3 months to do that. So why do I bring this up? So you can start to get mentally the idea of, if I can't have it now, when can I have it? All right, let's see how much I spend, and this is the idea. This is how much I have left over. It's going to take me 3 months, which is not a long time for you to get $1,000 and save up for something like a laptop. All right, the next one. What can you do differently to save up for the laptop? Now, there's 2 different things. Now, you probably said a bunch of different things based on here, but it's going to be wrapped up around 2 things. It's either you spend less or you make more money. That's the only way that you're going to be able to save up for this faster. And you remember that if you want to do more, you don't always have to make more. Maybe it's that you just have to spend less. All right, let's look at this last one. I know all of you got this because I kind of beat this one down a little bit. What should you do before you start saving up for the laptop? An emergency fund. That's right. Now remember, this is when you start to get bills. This is when you have some form of responsibility. You want something to fall back on in case you can't meet that responsibility. But for now, just focus on saving up for those things that you actually want. So one, you start to get the understanding of savings. You don't have to always go towards your parents, or you can now start to appreciate and look at how money is going to work for you. And I promise you, when you start saving up, you're going to start second guessing on really spending things that you really don't want, because you're going to notice the energy it takes to get that. And you're going to start asking yourself one key question: does it bring value to me? And then you'll say, all right, it does. So it's going to make me feel good, so I'm going to buy that thing. All right, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately for none, happy for me, I got some homework for you. I got something for you to do when you now get off the session and come back home. All right, you ready? All right, you're going to answer 2 particular questions. You're going to think about 2 things. The first one is, I want you to think about something that you really want to buy that's more than $500, a big ticket item. Now, it could be something that's more than $500 or a lot more than $500, or it could be a couple of things that adds up to $500. But I want you to think about that thing that you want that probably somebody isn't going to buy for you right away. All right, think about that thing, and here is where the next part of it is. Let's say it was you in this scenario, that you had this job and these were your expenses. What I want you to find out is how long will it take you to save up for that one item, whether it's a couple of weeks, whether it's a couple of months, whatever it is. So first of all, think about that item that you really want, come up with the amount, and then now if this was you with this particular job, how long would it take you to save it up? Now, if you need to, take a picture of it with your phone, take a print screen with your computer, or if not, I will send this to Mr. Davis or Mr. Thomas after this, and they can share it with you after. So that's some homework for you to do and to reflect about savings. All right, earlier I mentioned this concept called financial freedom. And maybe you heard it, maybe you heard someone talking about it, it came up, or maybe you've talked about it amongst your peers, whatever, so be it. But think about to yourself, what does that mean to you? What does financial freedom actually mean? I really want you to capture that thought. What does financial freedom mean to you? Because it can mean different things to each of us. So continue to think about what it means to you. Now, it can mean different things for a lot of us. There are tons of different reasons that people can come up with, but it's wrapped around two particular time frames. It's about financial freedom now, which is current, and later, which is in the future. Now, when you think about now, when you think about currently, it's about your lifestyle. Have you reached the lifestyle that you desired, and can you pay for that comfortably? All right, have you reached that lifestyle, and can you pay for that comfortably? You reach that lifestyle for you as well as the family. Now, when you think about the future, that's talking about have you saved up enough for retirement for that lifestyle that you want to desire later? And it is way early for you to start thinking about. Maybe you started thinking about it, and we'll talk more about that in our investing session. But when it talks about future and financial freedom, have you saved enough to live that lifestyle that you want later? But here's one that many individuals don't think about. Can you pick a career and it not be based about salary? Now, that's weird for many individuals, because it's like, well, why else would I work if it's not about the money that they're going to give me? Now, don't get me wrong, money is a factor, but money doesn't have to be the most important factor. And can you get to a point in your life, and can you design your life financially to pick a job and it not be just about the money? Now, when you think about achieving financial freedom, there are a couple of things that I want you to consider. And one of them right off the top, that reaching financial freedom, many individuals attach money to that. Now, that's a part about it, but it doesn't always have to be about making more money. Financial freedom, individuals wrap it around, I want to make so much money that I can buy whatever it is I want and not have to worry about. It's not always about making more money. When you think about the concept of financial freedom, it's about being able to get up in the morning and just walk outside and do whatever it is that you want to. Now you're like, well, yeah, if I had all the money in the world, I can do that. But let me help you think about something. Think about the individual who has a high salary job, which you're probably aspiring to do. And I'm not knocking that. I think those are great. I have a pretty decent job, paying job. Now, think about that same individual, and they built a lifestyle around that high salary job. That individual can't just walk away from it and do whatever he wants, because why? He has to go to work. He has to be able to, now let's say he says, you know what, I'm tired of this job. I don't want to do it anymore. Well, he can't leave that job. Why? Because now he has to pay this mortgage for this mansion that he bought, or these nice cars that he has. And I'm not knocking these things. I'm just saying that if you build a life that you're dependent on, or that they're dependent on you, you'll find yourself that you're not as free as you think that you are. Now, let's think about this same individual with this high salary job. Let's just say that he bought a used, reliable car and paid it off. Let's think of that same individual buying a nice home, not a mansion, a nice home, and managed his money well and paid it off. That same individual and can design his life and say, you know what, this job isn't the best job for me. I'm going to make a shift. And he can do that a little freely because he's now not dependent on that job. Now, when you think about retirement and you think about financial freedom and retiring, that pretty much says that if you build this life with having less, or building a lifestyle that's not dependent on your job, you may need less money to retire, which means that maybe you can retire a little bit early. Now, if you're still thinking about goals to reach in life, I guarantee that's one that you should add on your list: retiring early. Now, that's retiring from not working from someone. But that doesn't mean that you're not going to work anymore. What that really means is that you go to work because you want to and not have to. And that means you go to work and you do what you want to do and not what you're forced to do. And for some of you, you're like, well, that makes no absolute sense, because all I think about a job is not wanting to go there. Every time I see people, they don't like their jobs, and even if they enjoy it, they seem frustrated. Well, let me tell you that I'm a living example of someone who loves their job. And I'll tell you now that I actually turned down a job that offered me to pay almost twice that I'm making now. And I turned it down for two reasons. Number one, I wasn't going to fully enjoy what they were going to tell me to do. And secondly, that they were asking from me time that I didn't want to give them, because that's time that I was going to take away from my family, from my friends, and I wasn't willing to give them. That salary that they were going to give me wasn't enough. And what I found was a job that allowed me to live the lifestyle that I want time-wise and do the things that I love. I teach for a living, for a job, and I get up in the morning, and interestingly enough, I'm happy and I love what I do. I get jobs offered to me and I'm like, you know what? I'm okay. I'm okay with what I'm doing right now. Does that mean that I'm going to stay here forever? Absolutely not. I'm still building exactly what I want to do. But what's important is that I built a financial lifestyle to be able to turn down a job, because my what I do every day, my lifestyle, is not dependent on what I do. So I brought up a lot of stuff. There was a lot of stuff that I talked about, but I want to make sure that I leave a couple of key things with you. So first of all, right off the bat, is understanding how your cash flow is key to financial freedom. We mentioned financial freedom. It's about understanding where you're spending your money. Now, the money coming in is pretty easy for you right now because it's either a job or it's either your allowance or birthday money, whatever it is. But the focus is on where you're spending your money, because that's how you can control it. Now, creating an emergency fund is foundational. Now, again, that's when you start having bills, when you start getting responsibility. So for now, just focus on spending on those things, savings on those things that you want. Now, again, savings works best when it's connected to a goal. For example, whether it's a vacation, a home, a retirement, a laptop, whatever that is, but just make sure you connect a goal for you to reach that. And lastly, and I don't want anybody to tell you differently, that money is meant to be used and it's meant to be enjoyed, whether it's now or it's later. It's about spending it and using it responsibly. That's the key piece for you. And I want to close with this quote from Martin Luther King Jr. Now, whether it's about life, whether it's savings, since that's what we're talking about now, think about this. You don't have to see the whole staircase. Just take the first step, because that's when we start to get discouraged, when you're like, I'm never going to get there. Just take that first step, and I promise that you're going to get there. Thank you very much. It's been my absolute pleasure to hang out with you for this last hour. I will stop sharing my screen and see if there are any questions out there in chat or any comments or anything else that you want to know from me.
That was a wonderful presentation. If anybody has any questions, I think there definitely should be some. Students, go ahead and ask the questions. I'll read them off. Gave you guys a lot of good information that you can use for your life. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put it in the Q&A box, and I will read them off so Mr. Alexis can answer them for you. Also, too, for you students that attended today and stayed the entire time, you also did earn points in the contest, so congratulations on that. And this is the first part of a 4-part series. So every Friday, next Friday, and then we pick back up, actually next 2 Fridays, and then we pick back up the first Friday. You guys come back in January. We have a student that says, how do you feel? I'm not a student, actually one of our colleagues, Ms. Henning says, how do you feel about cryptocurrency?
I would say it's a great investment. Just do your research. For me, I haven't gone into it because I missed my window. So what I've been advised to do is to look at some of these secondary companies that are a little lower, because some of the companies that started off, they're a little expensive to buy, and you might not get as much value to grow. There's not enough room for you to grow and get as much money. But I think it's good enough to look into. But look at some of the other companies that are just starting, because you might be able to find a better gap to increase your money. I hope that answered your question.
I'll ask one. So for you had mentioned about savings, and also too, you had mentioned about different type of accounts, and I know you're going to be talking about some of those things as you go forward. With a student that is under the age of 18, and if their parents open up account for them, once they turn 18, are they able to take ownership of that account, or will they have to get a whole new account?
They'll be able to take ownership. So it also depends on the bank. Number one, yes, they'll be able to take ownership. What depends on the bank is whether it'll happen automatically or if they have to go in and tell the bank, hey, listen, I turned 18. And what will probably happen is they're going to give you an account that suits your needs, because they have accounts specifically, for individuals under 18 that have little to no fees. And then when you turn 18, what would tend to happen is they might keep you in something similar, but maybe with a higher interest rate or something of that nature. And if they have a fee, it's because they want to make sure that you keep a certain amount in there. But yes, you'll be able to get it. The only thing I would ask the bank is, does it happen automatically, or do you have to tell the bank to switch it over?
And we have a student has a question. Esther said, at what age is it necessary to start saving for college and an apartment?
That's a twofold question. So what I would first focus on is the timeline. All right, so when is it that you're going to need an apartment? All right, so if you know the apartment's going to come, if you have to have an apartment. I'm a mama's boy, so I love my mom. I would have lived with my mom, until I got married. If I still lived there, if you don't have to get an apartment, don't get an apartment. Because your point is to stack your chips. Now, if you live at home and you're going to college and you have a job, I would probably, give your parents a little bit of money to help out with some of the bills. But that's my first guidance. But if you have to get an apartment, look at the timeline, because that seems to be a more recent goal. So I would start saving up for that first month. I would try your best to get a roommate, and I encourage you to get a roommate, someone that you're okay living with, and then so you can split that bill. And then as it relates to college, what I would start doing is homework on financial aid and see what's going to be the gap of what financial aid is going to give you, scholarships that you're going to be getting, and what is it that you're going to have to actually pay. So I know it wasn't a straightforward answer, but there's some homework you have to do on which one you should be doing first. Mr. Davis, tell me if that was a little too deep, if I should go a little more into it.
Just elaborate a little bit more if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's think about this. So as it relates to college now, for some of you, you're in high school, so that's right coming up. And, some of your guidance counselors could help you on financial aid. And financial aid basically is what either the state or what they're going to give you towards your tuition, what they're going to give you to you, either maybe staying on campus or towards an apartment. This is money they're going to give you. And that's all based on your parents' income, on how much they're going to give you. Now, something that you can control is scholarships. And scholarships are money that you can earn either by good grades, athletes, you applying for them. So you have to do some research. Again, talk to your guidance counselor. They can help you. And this is free money that they'll give you towards college. So let's just throw a number out there. Say college is, $20,000. I don't know what college is these days. And financial aid gives you $10,000. And then you find that you get $5,000 in scholarships. I'm just throwing numbers out there. That means you have $5,000 left to pay for that year. Now, they're not going to send you a bill that year. Most likely you'll get like student loans or something. But now you can say, all right, I have to pay $5,000 a year. This is what I have to save up for. So let's see how much money I have, and let's see how much money I can put towards that. Seems a little complicated, but it really isn't. It's just about finding out how much money I have to pay. Now, again, when it comes to an apartment, the question you have to ask yourself is, do I really need an apartment? And if the answer is yes, I think that one is more important to focus on now. And what you're looking for is what's called a security deposit. Every apartment's going to ask you for that. And that's usually 1 month's rent. And then the second thing you're going to look for is a roommate, if you absolutely can, because it'll help you split that rent. If you can find more than one roommate, as long as there's more than 2 bedrooms, then find more than 2 bedroom roommates, because it's going to help you split that amount. And then, so go shopping, look online, see how much an apartment is and how much a security deposit is and how much that first months of rent is. So that way you know what you're saving for. So again, if you have to get an apartment, I would say that one will be first. If you don't, focus on college and start saving up for that. Answers on that. Questions on that.
I think that was an excellent answer, excellent response. Thank you so much for your time today. And again, thank you, students, for participating. We're trying to make sure we're giving you guys the best information out there and the best people to hear it from.